Anyway, I want to talk tonight about front wheel bearings and greasing front wheel bearings. How often should you grease your front wheel bearings? Well, not very often. I mean, realistically, I mean, once every what? Once every 5 years. That means that most of us here haven't done it on that schedule. Once every 12,000 miles. That's pretty frequent too. The T types, TCs, TDs, MGAs. Those are buggers and midgets. Those are buggers to grease. You got to take the hub off, drive the bearings out, put grease in your hand, push the bearing against the grease and get it. It's a big project. An MGB, on the other hand, is really easy, and I'll explain why. So I brought along my prop here, which is the MGB front suspension. As long as I don't drop this on my keyboard, will be okay. So the first thing you do when you're going to set up the grease the front wheel bearings, the first thing you do is pull out the split pin. You don't have to. You can just put a socket on it. I think it's 1 1/16. Maybe it's 1 1/8, and just shear it off. But that's improper technique, but it works. Anyway, you want to put your socket on this nut and crank it down to as tight as you can get it. I mean, I don't know, 60, 80 pounds, as much as a cylinder head nut. You're leaning on an 18-inch, 14-inch breaker bar. It's tight, really tight. Okay, that's the first thing that you do so that you can tell if the number of shims in the bearing pack is correct. If you have no shims or the shims are too thin and not enough shims, then when you tighten up the nut, it'll tighten up the hub. The hub has to spin freely, has to spin freely. Now, not theoretically, there's supposed to be in and out here, there's supposed to be 2 to 3 thousandths of movement, which you can't feel if there's grease on the bearings. If you feel a clunk when you grab a hold of the hub and try to move it in and out of the car, then if you can feel a tunk, it's too much. To grease the front wheel bearing on the MGB, all that's necessary once you set up the tighten up the nut to make sure that the shims you have in there are correct. You should always have an extra set of shims around. Take the nut off. You've got the brake caliper still in place. You got the rotor on the front. You jiggle this, and off comes the front washer, which has got a tag on it, and that keeps it from spinning, holds it in place, keeps the nut in place, and then you wiggle more and more, and the bearing comes out. The outer bearing comes out. Underneath the outer bearing are some shims. Let me take the hub off this. Well, great. I must have stolen the shims out of here to use on someone's car. But lying between the end of the spacer and the outer wheel bearing, right in here, are shims. The shims come in 4 sizes: 25 thousandths, 10 thousandths, 5 thousandths, and 3 thousandths. And your goal is to put in just the right number of shims so that when you tighten up this whole assembly, when you tighten up the nut, there's the 2 races that are sitting on the inside of the hub allow the hub to move back and forth here 2 to 3 thousandths of an inch. That's just a tiny, tiny little bit. Again, if you don't have enough thickness in the shims, the hub will tighten up because these bearings are going to collapse against the races. On the other hand, if you have too much distance there, too many shims, then you'll be able to grab the hub and you can move it in and out. Now, the proper way to test the end float is to put a magnetic dial indicator on the brake hub, on the brake rotor rather, and then have the finger pressed down on the end. And then as you move the whole thing back and forth, you can see on the dial indicator that it's moving. A lot of people don't have a dial indicator. So when the nut is all when it's greased and the nut is all the way tight, 60 pounds on it, you should be able to spin the hub freely. And when you grab a hold of the hub and try to move it in and out, you should feel no tunk. Okay, that's when it's correct. When you're setting the thing up originally, if you're doing like a restoration, you got the whole front suspension apart, you're changing the hub oil seals, you're cleaning everything, set it up in oil. Set it up in oil and just do it in oil first. That is so much easier than struggling with all the grease. Those little those shims are literally paper thin, and it'll drive you crazy sometimes trying to get them on and off. But the trick here is that this bearing, the inside bearing, never goes dry. The grease migrates. I'm not exactly sure why, because the diameter is larger on the inside than the outside? I don't know. But I have seen MGBs that the outer wheel bearing has starved for grease. The stub axles turned blue, snapped off because it all jammed up. And yet on that car, the inner bearing still had grease. So when you go to grease the front wheel bearings on an MGB, it's not necessary to grease the inner and outer. Just grease the outer. Okay? Take it out, put it in your hand, put the grease in your hand and push the bearing so the grease comes up through it. Gob a lot of grease on it, put it all back in place. But before you do that, you want to make sure you've got that shim pack correct. The MGAs, the T-types, the midgets use roller bearings. There's still a distance piece. There's still a distance piece that sits between the bearings, but this end float isn't as critical. Now, if the distance piece is too short, it'll bind up. No, that's no good at all. That's horrible. If it's too long, then it'll tunk back and forth. But your only controller on roller bearings is this distance piece. I was working at GT, I don't know what, at Lake Delavan, Wisconsin in 2015, I think. I had a tech seminar going. We're doing it on the grass. Nice place to do a tech seminar, unless you drop something, and then it's gone forever in the blades of grass. During the tune-up part of it, I was working on the carbs, and Jeff Schlemmer was working over on the other side. So we were able to get cars through that lineup really, really quickly. It was a lot of fun doing it. One guy came up and wanted me to, I don't know what, adjust his front brakes on a Z-type magnet, which uses the roller bearings, not the taper bearings. And I said, okay, well, we put a jack down on the grass, maybe something, piece of wood or something underneath the jack, started to jack the car up. And as the car came up, I saw right at the end, once the load was taken off the tire, that the wheel went to tunk. I thought, what? And I grabbed it at 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, and I could wiggle that tire a lot. And I thought, okay, well, something's wrong. So we ended up taking it apart on the grass, taking the front hub off, driving the big bearing out of the inside of the hub, putting a spacer putting a spacer inside to move the relative position of the bearing and reduce the end float. So anyway, anything's possible. It's fun to solve problems in the field when you don't have quite the right parts. But on those earlier cars, the distance of this piece is critical. It shouldn't change, but it's not adjustable. On the MGB, because of the wheel bearings, it is adjustable. Now you say, well, look, I mean, all American cars, come on. American cars, you tighten up this nut, you tighten up the nut until the bearing, until the whole hub freezes, can't turn, and then you back it off until the next hole. That's easy. Okay, and then it spins right. Well, at this point, um, because on the end of here, I think this is half 20, 5/8 20. This thread on the end, this thread is probably around 20 threads per inch. So that means 50 thousandths per turn. So that means if you turn right on my keyboard, if you turn this guy one castle slot, you're moving at 8 thousandths. So you can't get this very fine adjustment that the MGB workshop manual calls for. The next thing, which is the interesting thing about why they have this whole setup and you're getting that front nut tight, is imagine that you've got a threaded rod. Okay, you got a threaded rod, long, 3 foot long, and you put it up against your knee, you put your hands on it, and you can bend it into a U shape. Okay, so then you take a piece of, let's say, electrical conduit, and you put that on your knee. Oh, that's a whole lot better, a whole lot harder to bend. But imagine that you're strong enough, and you can bend that too. But if you put that threaded rod down on the inside of through the electrical conduit and put a nut on either end and tighten it up really tight, it's under stress. And any system under stress is stronger than a system not under stress. And it makes it harder to bend than either of those pieces are individually or even added together because of the stress. And that's exactly what's going on here. So take this guy apart. So here's our threaded rod. Okay, if we want to talk about a threaded rod from my example, here's the threaded rod, and here's the conduit that goes over it, so to speak. So the first thing we have is this tapered washer here, and that's because there is a radius at the stub axle. There has to be a radius for strength. You can't just have a 90 degree. That tends to help this snap off. I'm not involved with racing, so I've never seen damage from use in racing. In 50 years, I have never seen an MGB front spindle snap off. I have seen T-types and midgets, not MGAs, but T-types and midgets. I have seen those fatigue. Anyway, that's why the radius is here, and that's why the chamfer is on the inside. So we put that over here. Now the seal, the hub oil seal rides on this piece. Then we've got the inner race from the inner wheel bearing that continues to make this imaginary piece of conduit. Here we've got our spacer. He goes on. The shims, which I did not bring tonight, go on. Then we have the inner race from the bearing, and then the washer. And finally, we've got the nut that I talked about before. And when we tighten this up to 60 pounds of torque, 80 pounds of torque, this nut, then this whole system lies under stress.
We kept throwing shims in there.
There we go. I got everybody muted again just for a minute. And um, and once this nut is tight, this whole system is under stress and is much, much stronger than it would be normally. Now there are ways to fit taper bearings into T-types and MGAs, certainly midgets. You can make a case for it. Um, even though you lose this stacked way that they've done the two, the one inside the other, to make that front strong. But I have seen people put taper bearings into T-types, MGAs, and certainly midgets. And again, in 50 years, I think I've seen one or two snapped stub axles. So it's not really a safety issue if you want to put taper bearings in there. There's certainly stuff online to tell you what to do and what Timken number and so forth to use. What grease do I use up there in the front end? NGLI or NLGI, National Grease and Labor Lubrication Institute. Number 2, lithium grease, red grease. Use it for everything. Used to be, back in the day, that there were different greases for all kinds of different applications. And wheel bearing grease, it was stringy, it was really stringy. But today you just use number 2 lithium and it works out great. So anyway, that is my quick little thing on MGB front suspension. You don't need on the stub axles bearings. You don't need to remove the whole thing. You don't have to take the caliper off and the whole front hub off. You can um, simply um, um, grease the outer wheel bearing. And as I said, I've never seen an inner wheel bearing go dry.
Hey, John.
Yes,
This is
sir.
John.
John.
Well, that's great. I was looking, those wheel bearings appear to run, I mean, from Moss about $20 or less. What would be the symptoms that would tell you that maybe you needed to replace a wheel bearing? I mean, other than the fact you take it out and the little rolly things aren't there.
Well, yeah, um, on my MGA, which is a deluxe, which is like an MGA twin cam, which has the same setup as a B. It's unlike the MGAs. I went through, Carolyn and I drove that to, it's a long story. I'll try to shorten it, to Dallas. We drove it to Grapevine, Texas in what, 2002, 2003? And we went through a huge rainstorm, just unbelievable rainstorm on the way down there. Cars were off the road. I kept going, not at freeway speed, but I still stayed on the freeway. About a year later, I was driving home and I'm hearing this, and I thought, what in the world is that? And I took it to the shop the next day and popped the wheels off, took the front bearings apart, and they were all rusty. Where where'd the water come from? It had to have come from the year before in Arkansas. I think we're driving through Little Rock when that storm hit. That was pretty bizarre, and I heard that from the noise. Now I had a guy with a Z-type magnet driving from California to Flint, Michigan. If you're from California, why would you go to Flint? But anyway, he called from, I don't know, beyond Chicago, someplace, and said, "Hey, I want to stop in and have you change my left front wheel bearing." I said, "How do you know it's bad?" And he says, "Well, I've been driving for 2,000 miles and listening, and I just figure that's that's where the problem lies." I said, "Well, that's a better diagnosis than I could ever do." But we got his car in, got it up on the hoist, got the thing apart, and one of those little little balls or the cage had failed, and the balls weren't turning true. So why else would you change a wheel bearing? Because you grab the top and bottom of the wheel and it wiggles, and you grab the sides and it wiggles. If you grab the sides and wiggles, it can be the tie rod end or the rack and pinion. Top and bottom, it can be the kingpin. So you've got to wiggle and look at the back side of it. It's a real task. But anyway, that's about it. The wheel bearings just don't go bad. I mean, they just don't go bad. If there's discoloration on the metal, if you can see, you probably can't see down inside the hub here, but no, you really can't see. But if there's, if the metal of the on the race is discolored in the same area that the rollers have been moving, sure. If it's spalled, if chunks of metal are out of there, it's starting to break up. Well, yeah, for sure. But it's just a wasted exercise to buy new bearings most of the time.
Okay. One last thing, because 2 out of 3 of my cars are not MGBs, but are A and T type. Uh, go over again briefly, if you would, what you have to do on them. Do you have to take the inner and outer bearings out and grease them? Is
Well,
that basically it?
on a T-type or an MGA, sometimes you have to use a wheel puller to get the whole hub assembly off because the inner bearing, which is a roller bearing, but the inner race on that gets stuck on the stub axle.
I see.
Okay, so you go to pull the thing off and it won't come off. It won't come off. And then sometimes you put a wheel puller on it and it does come off. The hub comes off, the outer wheel bearing, the spacer, but it leaves the inner bearing and of course the seal stuck in here in this bottom race. And then you got to use slide hammer, put fingers around it, tunk, 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 and pull it off. If that happens, then you want to take some sandpaper, 100 grit, something like that, and with a loop of paper around the axle, this way, upside down, so that you get it all cleaned up, so that bearing doesn't go on with such you want some interference, but you don't want so much interference that it won't come off. So anyway, it's a job. It's a job to get those hubs off, and then um, you can on a wire wheel. On a wire wheel, of course, it's even worse because everything's all way down, that deep down inside the hub, and you can use the spinner from your car to extract to extract the hub by taking a piece of wood. You got the nut off. You got the nut off on the inside. Put a piece of wood in there that sticks out just a little bit beyond the end of the wire wheel hub. Put the spinner on. Tighten it up, and as you tighten up the spinner, the spinner stuck, it can't go in, so the hub comes out to meet it, and you can keep using different sizes of pieces of wood and tightening up that spinner. There's a factory tool that spins onto that thread, that Rudge Whitworth thread, and then there's a bar that goes down the middle, and you turn it and it pops the hub right off. It's real nice. But one of those three finger hub pullers that you used to be able to rent. Maybe you still can from some of the there's one of the parts stores that rents
Like
tools.
Napa and
AutoZone.
AutoZone,
AutoZone,
they all rent.
yeah, and of course the price of the rental is the price of the tool. They're just selling it to you temporarily, sort of, to get you in the store. But that's the only place left I know of to get some of these older tools.
Yeah, well, that's another good reason to eschew the wire wheel.
Yep, yep. You
Yeah.
can make a case for it, but there's nothing that looks classier, than
Only your wheels on your damn deluxe.
well, maybe those, maybe those.
John, we had a bearing go back in Utah, about 100 miles from nowhere.
Oh, geez.
I always carry an extra bearings, and but I was driving along. It felt like I ran over something. Ka-dunk. And then
Really?
a few seconds. Ka-dunk. And what in the world? Turned out to be a bad outer bearing, and we were stuck there. I had the bearings. I forgot to bring grease. But make a long story short, we were rescued by 2 van loads of Eagle Scouts. Guy had grease, and they wouldn't let me help do the job because they wanted to get a merit badge. So
A
it
merit
worked out.
badge and changing front wheel bearings on an
Yeah,
MGB. I,
helping a
I,
stranded motorist.
I
That
didn't
was
get that one either. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
That's good.
So yeah, but and the bearing didn't really look bad, but when you feel it, you could see it was something was wrong with it. But
It had flat
out of
spots.
yeah, it had flat spots, and
Oh my gosh.
and out of nowhere, and there was plenty of grease, but it just gave up
Well,
the ghost.
of course, your situation's different than most everybody's because of the amount of miles that you end up putting on that car. So,
That's why I carry all those extra parts and alternator
yep.
wheel bearings, uh,
U-joints.
U joints. So
There is.
U
Yeah.
joints can go.
Yeah.
We've had that happen a couple times just out of nowhere.
Yep. You just weren't
Yeah,
carrying a rear axle and a rear hub,
exactly.
when you were in Montana and that came apart. So,
Yeah, if I could have found a place to put them, that would have been something I knew I'd carry.
Mr. Twist,
yes, sir.
the question I have, I redid the front of my car, including the bearings and all of that last year. And I did see in somewhere, wherever I saw it, the high torque number that you were giving. I didn't use it because I was kind of paranoid that I read it wrong or misunderstood. So I think I used maybe 30 to 35 pounds. Would you recommend that I go back in and bring it up to at least 60?
That'll be okay. That's as long as it's that kind of tight, it'll be okay.
Okay, thanks for that.
And
I was,
if you do turn it, if you do turn that nut, another I think isn't this cross drilled? Um,
yes,
so you end up you don't have to turn it, you only have to turn it a twelfth of a turn. Yeah, you got a hole in this direction and you got a hole in that direction. So you don't have to turn it a sixth, you can turn it a twelfth. So I don't
okay.
next time you're in there, but I wouldn't disable the car, spend an afternoon doing it just for that. But you understand what the point of it is though, you
Oh,
know.
yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Where are you calling from? You got palm trees behind you there?
No, I'm in Virginia. That's just where I wish I was at.
Okay, all right. Well, okay. All right. Yeah, it's getting that way up here too. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Do we have any more comments about front greasing the front end, the wheel bearings on a B or a C, which is exactly the same as a B?
John,
Yes. Richard.
Richard Pittenger here, Troy,
Yes,
Ohio.
sir.
I've got 80 MGB. I've got no idea if any of this maintenance on those wheel bearings have ever been done. My mindset with my American cars is I want to take the whole thing apart, clean those bearings and everything around that hub as well as I can, and then grease everything and put it back together nice. And you've just told me that I don't need to worry about the inner bearing.
That's correct. Now,
Even,
it's been a long time. I mean, if you're unsure of the maintenance and so forth, but my experience is that if you replace the grease on the outer bearing and swath it in grease and put it back in and tighten it back up to the right torque, that it'll be better than it is today, and it's unnecessary to take it all the way apart. If you end up changing the front brake rotors, maybe, or I don't know if you're geeked on going more deeply in there, go for it. But you got to take the calipers off, and that means you got to bend the lock tabs back, and you got to hang the calipers with a piece of wire or a hook or something or other, so it doesn't stress the hose. Then it's pretty easy. Then you just take, again, tighten up the nut to begin with to make sure the shims are right. But then you grab the whole hub and pull the whole thing off and change the wheel, the front hub oil seal, and clean everything out. You can do that too, but you don't have to.
Okay. I mean, it seems fine the way it is. Uh, so I will take your advice. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. T, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
So if you're changing wheel bearings on the conical wheel bearings, is it essential to change the race as well?
Yes.
What if
you
what if the
don't have-
roadside repair?
Oh, well, that's combat. That's out there. That's out there. So if the inner race has gone bad, then the outer race is always in contact with it. So something's going on there too. But once you get back to your own garage and you can do it, but you should always change them together. Yes. I mean,
All right.
that's the goal. But if you're out in the field, what are you going to do?
Well, I'm referring to the actual race that you got to press out of the hub.
It's you probably can't see it, but there's let me bring this up here. No, you can't see them, but there's some cutaways on the inside. All you need is a long punch, and you hit it one side the other, one side and back and forth, tunk 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 for a while, and it'll ring right out of there. And then you put it back in the same way, and that metal's just harder than anything you've ever. I mean, you can't damage that metal with a punch and a hammer. You just can't. So you can. The outer race is easy to change.
Perfect. Thanks.
You're welcome.
John, this is Fred Conti from Mystic, Connecticut.
Yes, sir.
How are you?
Great.
This is great. I'm maybe halfway through a bottom-up restoration of a 61 MGA Roadster. I purchased the MGB front end from MGOC in Great Britain.
Okay.
It's got a wonderful set of components, double pot calipers and vented discs, and the MGB spindle. And I put the whole thing together. I bought a dial gauge, set it up on the spindle, and had to use both, sitting on the ground using both feet and pulling on the hub as hard as I could to get the dial gauge to move a couple of 2 or 3 thousandths.
That's with the grease in there, right?
Yeah, I didn't think, I didn't know that it would be better. I would be better, a lot better off if I hadn't greased it up, but I had already gone that
Sure.
far. So and it spun fine. So I put the wheels on, a nice set of new wire wheels. And lo and behold, when I did the wobble test, I get a tunk. And I'm just wondering, should I?
Well, the tunk could be between the wire wheel and the hub, but not if you've tightened up the spinner and you haven't driven it, then it's tight.
Yeah.
The tunk that you're getting, you shouldn't hear a tunk if it's 2 or 3 thousandths and it's greased up. Is it something else? Is
Well,
it?
it's a brand new spindle.
Well, I know, but is it-
everything, all the components are brand new. So there's no wobble in the Kingpin or
There shouldn't be any
tie rods.
wobble. Shouldn't be any wobble in the Kingpin. So but you can get the wheel off there and put that dial indicator back on there. You can grab the wheel and have somebody else move the wheel, top and bottom and so forth, and you can look in there, because sometimes if you just rest your finger on the brake rotor, you can tell that the wheel's moving, but the rotor isn't. I mean, it's just listening and looking to see what's going on, but you shouldn't have any tunks up there.
If worse comes to worse, I guess I'd take it apart and flush those bearings and start off with the oiled bearings and redo the
dial gauge thing.
You could, but it sounds like you got that now. I mean, it might be that one of the races settled. It might be
Yeah.
that you tightened it up and the races weren't in all the way. You got it most of the way, and then I don't know, one of them went pop,
Yeah.
right at the very end and moved 6 thousandths.
So taking it apart and putting it back together might help.
Oh, I don't think you need to do that. If you
No.
if you take the nut off and take the washer off and the outer wheel bearing out, and a shim always comes off on the back side
Right.
of that,
Yeah.
back side of that.
Sure.
Put it back together without the shim, tighten it up. That'll make sure the races are tight.
Yeah.
And then go ahead and put that back in and measure it again.
Okay. Will do.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, hi, John.
Yes,
I'm
sir.
from Sydney, Australia.
Yes.
If I want to just do the outer wheel bearings and I take the shim, do I need to buy a new set of shims or do I just
No.
use the current shims?
No, you're using the same bearings. You take that outer wheel bearing out, just grease it and put it right back in.
Okay,
That's
good.
it.
Thanks.
It's just easy schmeezy. If you change bearings, it's sometimes you can lose a shim. You take it out, and one of the shims comes off the end of the stub axle and gets caught. You got wire wheels or disc wheels?
Wire wheels.
Yeah, well, those are. Oh boy. Anyway, because that's so deep in there, but that shim can come off here and lie to the edge, and then get moved into the inside. So you lose one of the shims. So you just got to be careful. That's all. Just I mean,
Understand.
just keep it illuminated and be careful what you're doing, so forth. But yeah,
Okay.
just grease that outer one. It's so fast, it's so easy. So I don't know if you've been in the center of your country, you've been riding around in sand for a week. Well, then there's probably a different set of rules, but just normal maintenance.
Okay, great. Thanks.
What's your temperature there today? Is it starting to warm up a lot?
It's pretty mild today. It's 22 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
But we've been having some about 28, 30 a few
Yeah.
days.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, but a bit warmer than where you are.
Well, for right now, but that's gonna flip in 6 months, right? So yeah. What other questions do we have for front suspension or greasing the?
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Real quick.
Jim.
All right, you turn around and you're saying like regular grease, and then you like to use lithium grease. All right. Can you mix them? All right. Or say if you have regular grease in there, and
I
then
think
you go.
regular grease is lithium grease.
Oh, it is?
I think so.
Okay.
I don't know where the lithium is in the grease. Lithium and water blows up. And lithium is. I don't know where the lithium comes into grease. But it's called that. It's number 2. Take a look on the back of your grease, on your grease tube of grease. It'll say what it is, what spec it
But
is.
there wouldn't be any problem mixing them.
No.
Fantastic.
John, can I add one thing or two things?
George, yes.
Sometimes you'll find an extra shim underneath the nut, and that's sometimes people put a spare one there. The other thing is when you're putting new races in, when that race bottoms out, it will change its sound.
Okay.
It goes into the hub. You'll actually hear it change its sound.
This is when you got a drift and a hammer, and you're tongue back and forth, and when it's home, the whole thing's solid. Yes. Thanks.
Yes. You're welcome.
We used to take. That's the first time I've ever heard of that. we used to take these apart because this is part of the complete lubrication, and we sold more complete lubrications than any other service, more than tuning, more than anything, the complete lube. And we'd take this nut off and we'd find the shims out here. We'd find the shims in here. And never once did I think, oh, what a handy place to keep extra shims. I always figured that the DPO didn't have a clue what was going on and put them back wherever they fit. But anyway, that first time I've heard that. So that's cool. Thanks.
John, would regular wheel bearing grease work?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a regular wheel bearing grease is the same as suspension grease. And it's almost, I mean, the spec is number 2, NGLI number 2. That's the grease you buy in a tube. You know, it says wheel bearing grease or whatever. Yes.
Hey, John.
Yes, Mark.
Yeah.
Hey, coming to you from across the Great Lakes state in Michigan, so I'm not too far from you.
Okay.
For those that couldn't interpret Great Lake State, I just purchased a 1980 MGB, and it has 21,000 miles, and it's had great maintenance. But I don't know if the front wheel bearings have ever been touched. Should I do that outer?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Okay.
So what you want to do is go on the website universitymotors.online, and you want to look up, find the complete lube. Now that I've said that, Marty will put it over in the chat section. And just, I don't know how many points there are, 100 things, 200 things to do. And just go 1, 2, 3, all the way through it, because no one's ever changed the oil in the diff. They might have topped it up. They haven't changed it.
They have topped it off. I know that. I found that but I don't know what that means.
No one's put oil in the front and rear shocks. Shock oil. It's got to be the right kind of oil, but no one's done that. No one's tightened up the front shock absorbers. No one's put oil in the rack and pinion. So I mean, I can almost assure you, I'd almost bet you real money, because that sort of stuff doesn't happen. Nobody does that stuff because it's not on any list. You know, but I know it has to be done, and it's on that complete lube list. So
I'm gonna get that and take a look at it, and then I'm gonna call the original owner and see what he's done on that list.
Just get the lube list and go. Just do it. Just go do it.
Okay.
And
all right. Thanks.
If you run into a snag on that lube list, you know, it says to do something and you go, what in the world are they talking about? Because there's no explanation. It's just a sentence in a blank to check it off. If you don't know what the hell's going on or what it means or anything, just give me a call and I'll be happy to interpret it for you.
So, all right. Thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing all your wisdom.
Yeah, thanks.
And experience.
Thanks.
Hey, John.
Yes.
While you were talking, I just Googled lithium grease. It's everything you say it is, and there's a gazillion discussions on why automobile applications should use it and ignore all the other stuff. So just I recommend people that had that question, just Google it. It'll tell you to use it. Lithium #2 grease, all purpose, does everything, is better than anything else at everything.
It goes in on your TD there at Judd. It goes in the pedals. It goes in the tachometer reduction box. It goes in the water pump. It goes everywhere. And if you take your wiper motor apart and you want to put some grease on the gears in there, you use it in there too. And back in the day, there were like all these different greases for all these different applications, and now it's just reduced down to all I have in the shop is a Lucas. It's kind of weird, you know, Lucas red grease. It's there's some humor there.
It is. Anyway, it's good stuff. There's a gazillion different brands.
Yes, I'm a champion of red grease because you can see it. You can see it when you're pumping it into, you know, the front suspension. Pump, and you're pumping a bunch of gold or black stuff out, and all of a sudden it starts coming out red. You go, okay, got it. And I know I've gone all the way through it. Of course, it doesn't work so well the next time, but anyway, I love red grease, and anyone who's been with me will tell you that I'm not shy about using grease. I use a liberal amount of grease. I went through almost a whole tube building an engine for a guy. He came up a year or two ago or something or other. We started on his engine when I had my shop 15 years ago, and he'd never got any further, put it together. And the part he did put together, he put together wrong. So we just took the whole thing back apart again. And I used, well, maybe not a whole tube of grease, but half a tube. Absolutely. And he says, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea you used so much grease," but it's great stuff. So,
Hey, Mr. Twist,
yes, sir.
now that you've mentioned the red grease, yeah, it's the Lucas Red and Tacky. And I
Yeah.
discovered it maybe a year and a half ago at a shop where I was, spending some time. And gosh, I use that thing on everything. I've even gone so far as, if we're talking about hubs and taking things apart, when I take wheels off, sometimes, every year, or if it feels a little sticky, I'll put a little bit on the lug itself, or
Yeah.
where's my brain? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Stuff. And just spin things on and take them off. And oh my gosh, it makes life so much easier. And every fastener I put my hands on, they get a little dab of grease, make them clean, make them slick.
Plus, it's tacky, so it works like temporary glue. I mean, for instance, let's say that you're putting studs on the back of your. Somehow we've gone from front wheel bearings into putting lifted out male studs on the body. But three of those go in pretty easily. The last one goes in. Oh my gosh, it's so difficult. So you put some grease on the end of your finger, and you put your 1032 nut on there. And then if you're really cool, a lock washer, a starter lock washer on top of that, and you hold it all and you get it all in there underneath where you can see it, from above in the hole, and that just holds it on your finger. That red grease is just great. Great. It's so many. I can't say enough for it. I can't say enough for it. I ought to get Lucas to pay me for the eight people who are going to start using it who haven't been using it yet. So, any more comments about front wheel bearings?
John, just one quick
Yes,
item
sir.
back on the relubing that outer bearing on the B. Should the bearing be cleaned very well before the new grease goes in?
No, just you push the old grease out with the new grease. So I can't. Marty and I were just talking today how we still don't have an index of all my videos. Someplace on there, if you can find one where I'm doing front wheel bearings or something, you put some grease in your hand and you push the bearing into it, and it pushes the grease up through the cage, and then I'm just grabbing the bearing off here. So this bearing, for instance, you put the grease in your hand and you take the large part, the open part, and push it into the grease, and then the grease will eventually come out around the top, and it just pushes all the old grease out, and you discard that. So,
yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. About time to be getting into our chat section. We've eaten up all. I told Marty today, I said, "Oh, this will go real fast tonight." I mean, what is there to say about greasing front wheel bearings? But we've had a lot of questions. It's very nice indeed. So anyway, if there's no more ado about that, I'll make another pitch for you going on to my website, or probably the link that Marty's got in the chat section, and think about making it's getting close to Christmas, send me a Christmas present. So any and all contributions are welcomed. Thank you very, very much. So okay, here we go. We're on our chat section now. You asked last week about the car and the blue lift. It's Dave Fisher from Picton, Ontario. Thanks, John. So anyway, that's Picton from Ontario. Marty Bradley, here we go. We got Marty's got a whole bunch of pictures of cool stuff. We went through some workshop manuals and even went in the Haynes manual to find out that the person who'd drawn all the pictures in the Haynes manual had just copied the factory drawings, but they hadn't copied them, had done them in the same way. But they couldn't use the factory drawings, not back when they were producing those Haynes manuals. Here we go, Greg. Let's see, just a second here. Greg, I have no microphone on my computer. My question is, I'm rebuilding my MGB engine. I know to run it in for 20 to 30 minutes, 2000 RPM with break-in oil. When should I do my first oil change? Oh, probably after about an hour of running like that. I mean, the first, oh my gosh, that first run in really eats that stuff up. Some people go up to 500 miles on that first change. Depends on how much that oil costs you and how much of a shock it's going to give you. But that the first run in, that engine's scraping all that extra stuff out, and of course the filter is supposed to catch it. Oh, speaking of oil filters, my go-to oil filter, the Napa Gold 1068. Of course, I get a note from somebody in the last couple of weeks or month who said, "Oh my gosh, I went to Napa and bought a 1068 Napa Gold filter, and it interferes with the tube that comes up 1970 through 1980 MGB. It's too short, or something's on the inside of it. So be cautious." I don't. We've had all those other filter numbers out before, but anyway, it's just an aside. Anyway, first oil change on a run in. Quick. I do it. I do it pretty fast. It's the only thing you can do to protect the engine and all that investment in time and money is to have clean oil. So in that first hour running really uses up the oil, so pollutes it. So we got Brisbane, Australia. That's cool. And we've got Northumberland, David Alexander. Northumberland, I've been there. Gosh, Newcastle on Tyne. David, are you still on?
John, can I ask a question on the oil?
Oh yeah, Skip.
Okay, so I just rebuilt my engine. So I was going to do the 500 miles, but if I do, I've only got like 200 miles on it. If I go to the oil change now, do I go to the 2050 or do I continue on with the lighter oil?
No, you just the next time you change the oil, get rid of the break-in oil and use the normal high zinc oil, like
Okay.
like Valvoline, VR
VR1.
VR1. Thank you.
Yeah.
2050. Yep.
All right, thanks.
Sure. David Alexander, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here. Yep.
Oh, all right. Okay. So the first time I bought fish and chips in England was in August 1962 at the Haymarket in Newcastle. And I paid half a crown, 2 and 6, right? 12 and a half new pence. So in 2017, I went over MG Owners Club down in Cambridge, Swayze. I did some tune-up seminars there, and right when we got to London, I met a twin cam owner, and right downtown London, I came out of the Westminster tube stop, and there was a pub right next door, and so we went in there. I had fish and chips on a plate this time, and it cost me £12.50. That price wasn't stunning or anything, but I was thinking, that's 100 times 12 and a half new pence versus £12.50. That's 100 times what I paid for fish and chips. Now, to be fair, it was August 1962, and this was October 2017. So there's a distance in time, a distance from Northumberland down to London, and one was served a newspaper, and one was in a pub. But anyway, so where you from Newcastle or?
Well, not originally, but that's where I've lived for about 40 something years. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm up north of Newcastle, out on the coast. They're just not far from Morpeth, but not far from Newcastle.
Yeah. Nice.
So I'm part of the Tyne Tea Centre of the MG Car Club.
Yes.
But I have a ZB Magnet, which I've done about 10,000 miles in the last 18 months with.
Oh, good for you. Oh my gosh. There's a movie out called The Iron Lady. Oh, who plays Margaret Thatcher in that? Oh,
Meryl Streep.
yes, Meryl Streep. Thank you. So, she wins her first by-election, and they show her driving to Parliament in her ZB, and then later on when she started to move up the chain of command, she's driving like a 73 Harvest Gold BGT in the movie, which I expect is a relatively accurate representation of what she was driving. So hey.
Well, yeah, prior to having the Magnet, I had a GT, and I've also got an MGB as well. But my son drives that most of the time. I had to buy another car so that I could get in the GT.
Okay. Oh, very nice. Well, hey, welcome.
It's good to hear from you. Yes.
Okay.
John,
Yes.
if you ever have a
1 o'clock
chance,
in the morning here.
What time? What, 2 o'clock in the morning?
No, it's 6 minutes past 1.
Oh, all right. I think you're 5 hours ahead. Yep.
I'm just about to head to bed now.
Understand.
Good night.
Good night. Who came in there? And
you were talking about seeing the cars in the British series. If you ever watch the series The Crown, it has a remarkable collection of cars appropriate for the station of each person that's driving it, from Prince Philip to the ministers to the Queen to everybody. It's they're well picked out.
Yeah, I love those pictures of Prince Philip and his buddies, and TDs and everything. It's like, yes. Finally, our culture here, our MG culture, get some distance. Yep. Yeah, I watched that. I watched that until it got up to Princess Diana, and then I didn't want to watch it anymore. But anyway, yeah, there's a lot of films out there. If you want to find, I've said this before, but if you want to find MGs in movies, you don't go into the internet movie database, IMDb. You go into the Internet Car Movie Database, and then you look for model, and you can look for Daimler if you want to see Daimlers or Wolseleys or MGs, and then it'll say, well, do you want it just a single appearance, like if somebody stops at a stop sign and there's an MG at the cross street, or is it the focus of the movie? Not the focus of the movie, like Love Story. I mean, where it was a big part of it. So anyway, you go to the Internet Car Movie Database and find all that stuff too.
Put in the link.
Thank you. All right. So
Also, Moonflower Murders, the lead character drives a 67 MGB. Beautiful.
Moonflower Murder. That sounds like it took place in China or something.
No, it's England. A lot of murder mysteries come out of England. All those little towns have a lot of murders in them, so it'd be a dangerous place to go.
Yeah. Our vision of rural England is as skewed as the English view of the United States. Okay, here we go. John Lind. I sheared the driver's side half axle splines at the differential in my 76 midget. Looks twisted like wringing out a wet towel. happened when I slowly backed out of a parking space with the handbrake. Is that the result of that simply, or was it likely failing before I backed up? Oh, it had been failing for a long time. So those. It's a real common error, a real common problem with that type of spline. T-types do that, midgets do that, MGAs do that until they pick up the involute spline in 1959. Then after that they no longer twist off. But up until then, and midgets all the way through 1979 have got the it's like it's a six splines, and they're just cut out of the metal, and they have raw edges. And because they've got raw edges, they tend to fail there. So it actually snaps off. So when you take a half shaft out of a car, you should never put it on the other side. That causes it to fail more quickly. Of course, with the wire wheels, you can't in the back end because then the spinners are going the wrong way. But it's nothing that you did. It's just normal wear and tear. So it's just you got to get another hub, excuse me, another half shaft, and then you got to take it to a machine shop that supports the all the way around on the hub. Because if you just have this and press it, it'll bend because those half shafts are in those hubs with an awful lot of force. So, all right. So Pat Garrity, here he comes. I'm going to be a bit of a rebel. That's why he lives in California. Back in the 80s, I ran a shop specializing in MGs. Had a couple of refugees from BMC dealers. They both took the shims and spacers out and set the bearings up like every other car on the road at the time. No problems ever. I agree with that. If you look up the other cars that have these bearings, none of them use a spacer. I agree that spacers and shims are stronger, but these cars are so small, Pat says, I don't want to start an argument. You haven't. But if you don't have any spacers, you're not going to snap an axle. I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's better to have this set up correctly. And if you've got all the pieces, you might as well set it up correctly. But again, in 50 years, I've never seen a snapped front axle. Have you, Pat? Are you on?
I am, John. Only on my Chevrolet.
Okay. Which doesn't use a spacer, right? Yeah.
Well, I was circle track racing it.
Oh,
at the
okay.
time,
Well, yeah, that racing puts so many more stresses on the vehicle that I mean, it's unimaginable how stressed things get when you're looking at front suspensions and how they're moving up and down. You're turning the wheel and it's gone to full movement, full compression or full rebound or something or other. And it's just racing is a whole different deal.
And it had the classic example or symptoms of a car with bad wheel bearings. That is spongy brakes, pump it once, and they're good until you go around a corner again. The wheel tips over, shoves the pistons back in the caliper, and then it takes a lot of pedal movement to displace the pistons. But in a straight line, it doesn't happen. So luckily, I caught that spindle before it snapped, but I found the crack.
Oh boy. Yeah, I think TC Racers, for a while anyway, when they were doing the gentleman racing out here, it's the VSCDA, Vintage Sports Car Drivers Association. There are other licensing groups around the United States, but I'm pretty sure that TC's you had to have your front spindles X-rayed to make sure that there weren't any cracks. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Graff, get the shim set up with oil first. Big tip. Yes, it is. Thanks for that one. We'll be doing my first set of bearings on a 64 MGB soon. Okay. It isn't quite so critical on a disc wheel car, but if you got a wire wheel car, oh my gosh, what you're in there and of course you don't know what kind of shims you're supposed to have. You know you got to have a 25, and almost always you got to have a 10. But do you have 1 5? Do you have 2 5s? Do you have a 5 and a 3? Do you have 2 3s? Oh my gosh, oh my gosh! And if you're setting it up in oil, you could just whip that baby apart and quick change them and go back, and oh yeah, so. Let's say, John Lind, can the roller bearings on a midget be greased by injecting grease rather than dismantling the castle and washer? I've never done that. I've never seen anybody do that. Theoretically, yeah, sure. You drill a 1/4 inch hole or smaller hole, tap it, put a grease zerk in there, and pump some grease in there. But the only downside is you get too much grease in there, and it overwhelms the front hub oil seal, and so the oil spills out onto the brake rotor. That's the only downside that I can see from that. But now here, John Lynn's, new rubber bushings failed in 1.5 years. Oh my gosh. What year midget do you have, John?
Got the 1976 midget.
Oh
And
yeah, there's a lot of weight up there. That John Thornley, I think in Inside the Octagon, that movie that's available,
okay.
and he's talking about the Bug-Eye Sprite when it came out, and he said it only weighed 1,400 weights. So, geez, that's a help. How much is that? But it's like 1,600 pounds. But by 1976, with a Triumph engine and gearbox and the rubber bumpers and the extra weight in the doors, man, that front suspension is taxed to the max, and those bushings fail just easily.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happened on the rear too. So I've done the rear. Now I'm going to just move to the front and do the
Okay.
front.
All
Just
right.
take care of it all.
Yep.
But thank you for your help.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
it.
So Pat Garrity says about his TC that he just bought a sealed roller bearings from the Frame Up in Phoenix, and they're working great for him. So
Would that work on a TD as well?
I don't, he's been starting to sell some more T-type parts than just TC, but I don't know. I don't know. And again, what Pat Garrity said, that he had these two BMC mechanics that threw the spacers and shims away. And I've never seen and that TD axle is that big around. I mean, it's massive. I don't see it cracking. So you wouldn't end up with a spacer between the bearings if you're going to use taper bearings.
Well, he's on. I wonder, is that when he says sealed roller bearings, does that mean you never have to grease them?
They're sealed for life, which means
whose life?
The life of the bearing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'd rather have bearings I can grease. Yeah.
So TD bearings are a pretty common size, I think. I think if you went to a bearing house and gave them the dimensions and a 6-pack of beer, maybe one of the guys on the counter would research that and find you that. But I don't really see the big advantage on a TD. And honestly, I really don't see the big advantage on my TC either, but it's done.
Yeah, the roller bearings were just great. Pat says he found a great deal on Timken wheel bearings for his MGB at Rock Auto, R-O-C-K, Rock Auto. Okay, so Fred C is writing, and he says, I'm in the middle of a frame-up resto on a 61 MGA Roadster. Purchased the front end kit. We've already talked about this. And anyway, we talked about maybe the races weren't settled all the way, because he ended up with more play afterwards. We've already covered that. The next one up here, Drayden family. My BGT was pulling to one side under braking, and it turned out to be caused by the front wheel bearing on that side. I assume caused by greater friction in that bearing. Boy, I would argue with you if it pulls to one side under braking. Are you on right now, Drayden?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Okay, if you take your hands off the wheel and hit the brakes and it drifts one way or the other, that's one of the rear brakes not working. But if it actually wants to turn the steering wheel out of your hand, that kind steering, changing the steering on the steering wheel while you're hitting the brakes, that's the front brake hoses. But
Right. It was when I was going downhill, usually, and I put the brake on hard, it would pull distinctly to the right.
I would give you, the wheel bearing may have been faulty, may have been. I don't argue with that, but I think your main problem was the brake hoses. I can't make that work in my head.
Right.
Always something new out there, but brake hoses are good for about 10 years. That's what they tell you about tires now,
I
So,
paid for new bearings on that side and it fixed it.
okay. Hey, there's always stuff out there. You get into a lecture hall, and somebody will be saying, "Oh, that the TD, it came out in these colors in 1951," and some guy in the back says, "Yeah, well, I bought mine. It was pink." Or something, and you say, "No, that couldn't be true." And he goes, "Dude, I picked it up from the factory, when I was there in the Air Force." And so yeah, there's always stuff that comes up. I just don't understand how that could possibly be causing the problem. But anyway, it solved it. So where are you calling from?
I'm Auckland, New Zealand.
Hey, very nice.
So it's
Very
2:20
nice.
in the
Oh,
afternoon, about 20 degrees.
were you on last time and I told you to look at MG's Forever on Hulu?
Yes, and I've tried to find
It's
it.
not on Hulu. Thank you for being back on. It's on Vimeo, Vimeo, Vimeo.
Oh, okay. All
And
right.
if you Google MG's Forever on Vimeo, right like that, comes right
Okay.
up, right
I'll
up.
do that.
All right.
Thanks.
Let's see, Mike Baldwin. John, what runout dimension is max you recommend when setting up a new rotor and old hub combo? Well, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 thousandths,
Okay.
I mean,
The reason I asked is I couldn't find that information when I did it a couple years ago, but I stumbled into a little trick. I was about 5 thousandths run out when I put the rotor on the hub. And, this is when the pandemic thing was beginning to wind down, but you could order a lot of stuff. And I stumbled across something on Amazon and they could get a pack of 10 stainless steel washers. And the hole center was exactly the size of the stud. And you could get them in 1, 2, 5, and 10 thousandths. And so the combination of those, yeah, you had to play around the combos a little bit, and I was learning as I went with a dial caliper. But I got one of them to half a thou and the other a thou, just more or less, probably more than needed. But I sure had to worry about having to run out pumping the rotor. Pumping the pads.
well, that's what who was talking about that before on here? Pat Garrity talking about going around a corner, and,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden you got to hit the brakes and an extra pump because it's pushed the pads back so far.
Yeah, it works on your math a little bit, stack up and all that good stuff. But the first one took a lot longer than the second, as it always does. But 1 to 10,000 stainless steel, slip right on, easy peasy. But the only thing is you have to take the hub and rotor apart.
Oh my gosh.
Times,
Oh my gosh. It was sometime after that another manufacturer decided that maybe they'd leave the hub on and put the rotor on the outside of the hub.
Yeah, exactly. And I know you were there back in the day, but I heard a rumor that MG back in the day, like a lot of people, put the hub and the rotor getter and machine them as a unit to get the run out. Is that true?
I don't know. I can't imagine that's true. That doesn't make any sense from a production standpoint.
Well, on the C3 Corvettes from 63 through 82, that's what they did. The rear
hub and rotor were put together and rigged
Okay.
it as an assembly, and then they would turn it to get the run out. That's why if you took them apart, you had to make sure the rivets were put back in the right place.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, have a good one, buddy.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much. Let's see. Here we got Bill's iPads. Any advice on rear bearings? Yeah, if when you're putting them together, if you want to put some grease in there, you can. You don't want to put too much grease in there, or just oil them because the rear axle oil slips to one side or the other when you're running, and that's what oils the rear hub bearings. Not on an MG 1100. Those are taper bearings, I think, or roller bearings, one or the other. But a rear-wheel drive car, rear-wheel drive MG, the oil from the rear axle is what lubes the rear bearings. And that's why you don't want to use a sealed rear bearing because you've got to have some oil on the seal to keep that from overheating. And of course, if you get sealed rear bearings and the oil can't get through it, but the oil always does get through somehow. So anyway, I'm a fan of using open bearings, not sealed for life. And you don't have to do anything to them. Put some oil on them before you fit them, or just a little tiny bit of grease. So, Mike with a 69 midget recently replaced the front wheel bearings and rotors on my 69 midget. My only motivation was some rattling on the left wheel. Had about quarter-inch slack in the wheel that disappeared with the brakes pressed. The old bearings look good, but after replacing, the rattle disappeared. Boy, just a minute. I'm having a hard time with my cursor here. Anyway, so the question was, just figured 120,000 miles on the car and the bearings were worn a bit. I'm sure that that's true. I'm sure that that's true. So that's you can always replace the bearings. If you got problems up there, you can change them. That one gentleman from New Zealand said that his car stopped straight after changing the bearings. But anyway, I don't know what the rattle would be, but we had a car come in one time that had excessive front end vibration, and it came to us from another shop. The other shop either got sick of the owner or sick of the problem. But anyway, we got it in, and there was just a little too much free play in the front wheels, and the front wheels could wobble just a little tiny bit. So we reduced the end float on both sides, and bingo, the problem was taken care of. So, Wayne, I never remember where SLO is. MGTD, how far out should the pin that holds the wiper blades extend beyond the window frame? Mine looks like someone extended it, and it's about an inch long. There is about a quarter-inch gap when I put on the lever to separate it from the switch lever. So there are packing shims that go between the wiper motor and the top of the windscreen frame on the inside. So if it seems as though that pin is stuck too far out in front, it's because you're missing a spacer on the backside. That's my guess. That's my guess.
Thank you, John.
And here we've got somebody, did you see what Pat Garrity wrote to you in
Yes,
the
I
chat
did.
section? Experienced the same thing he's doing for a customer. You can trim it. Sure, you can trim it. Lots of cars use these motors, so I'm guessing the replacement motors were supplied with a shaft that you could trim. So that's certainly an idea. So, oh, here Pat Garrity, he wants to cause more trouble tonight. I'm going to continue to rebel. Lots of improvements in lubricants since Grandpa's white lithium grease. Redline has an excellent grease. When I taught for Ford, I was told there's no application for white lithium grease on a modern car. But that being said, these ain't modern cars. Okay.
You win, John.
Go ahead.
Going to say you win, John.
Oh, let's see.
Mr. Twist, could I get clarification on something you mentioned a moment ago?
Yeah.
You were talking about the car that came into your shop where the previous shop was either tired of the client or the problem.
Yes.
And the infloat, could you recap that so I can hopefully get it to click in my mind again?
So instead of having maybe 2,000ths of end float on the front hubs, maybe it had 4. And as a result, the wheels, I mean, the wheels can't ever run perfectly true. They're always going to wiggle a little bit, right? Because you can't take you can't go down to a preload situation on your front bearings. You got to have some play. And 2,000ths down there out at the end of the wheel ends up being some movement, not much, just a tunk. But his were more than tunking, and that in itself came back around to giving him front end vibration at speed. So it just wasn't. He had too much end float on the front hubs.
So that would be obvious by someone working in that area.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Stan, is there a T-Series complete lube list on the University Motors like you have on the MGB? No, we never did one. We never did because the MGB is the more complicated one. It's got a lot more stuff on it, but the MGB one doesn't tell you to grease the tack reduction box or the pedals either. That's about the only things that are not in the water pump. Those are about the only things that are not on there. Anyway, no, I don't have one dedicated strictly to the MGB or to the T-type. JD.
So John.
Oh, yes.
So John, with those 2 additions, would it be pretty close?
Oh yeah. Yeah. Well, if it says, like oil the electric cooling fans, it's like not going to happen on my car, or so yeah.
I'll try. Thanks, sir.
Okay. All right.
John,
yes.
The owner's manual, at least the original one for MGB, had a diagram of every grease point on the MGB, and it did include the pedals, and I forget more stuff than I ever oiled, or greased. But it had a diagram. I think it was 11 points on that.
Okay.
But it was original. It wasn't a reprint. It was an original, which somehow got away from me.
I've never seen the pedals on a B asking for oil. I used to think about, wouldn't it be kind of cool, that you'd drill a hole in them and put a grease zerk in there, but those are oil-like bushings, and so you don't want to grease them, you want to oil them.
Anyway. Yeah, I never did either.
No.
Just I thought, well, that sounds like too much trouble, and I can't stand on my head that long.
Yeah, that's about the size of it. Yeah. JD to everybody, I treated the car to new tires, rotors, calipers, pads, and while I was there, I packed the wheel bearings with grease. In my case, I was told to use Moly Extreme Pressure Grease Grade 2. Well, that Grade 2 is number 2. It's probably the same stuff. Probably. So whoever came on and said that they just slipped, I think it's Judd, who just slipped off and was Googling while he was listening. And there's a lot to be learned about grease, but that number 2, I think, is probably the critical number.
Yeah, the molybdenum grease can take higher temperatures.
Okay.
But I don't think we get high temperatures. So if you're getting high temperatures, something else is wrong.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Molly grease. When I first got in the trade, I was in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and there's a guy there that did Jags. And I went over to his shop one time to look and sort of see what he had. And he's showing me anti-seize. I'd never seen anti-seize, didn't know what it was. He was raving about how great it was to use on certain nuts and bolts and on the wheels and everything. And he shows me the can of it, and he's reading it to me. And he says, "Yeah, and it's got Molly." And I looked at the I looked at the can. I said, "You cannot get to molybdenum if you start with Molly." So yeah. But anyway, yeah, high temperature stuff. Does anyone have a list of what tools and parts to always keep in the car on an MGB? Yes, yes.
I did.
Okay. So farther
Keep
down in
going.
the chat, Marty's earning her wage tonight and has already read that and got that on there. Thanks. Let's see. Pat Garrity, grease works, but my favorite new tool is my magnetic finger, an elastic sleeve that fits on my finger with a magnet on the tip. Okay, Pat, we can have a magnet next time I'm out in. Oh, I'm going to be in California. I'm going to be in L.A. Second week in December, just visiting my daughter. But I don't know where you are. We should be in touch. Jim Mowry, are you on, Jim? Jim Mowry still on? Well, anyway, Jim Mowry worked for me. One of the first things you taught me, John, red grease is another tool. Great on gaskets when you want to service the components later. Yep.
Hey,
Let's see.
John,
Oh, here we go. Yeah.
I've got the original owner's manual for an MGB, and I can try to scan this and
There, no, I see
post it
number
somewhere.
4. I see number 4. Okay, the throttle pedal. I was thinking of the brake and clutch.
There you
Throttle
go.
pedal. Yep.
That's the original 1980.
Yep. Got it. Understand. That's very cool. They by 1980 they no longer ask you to oil the rack and pinion, but there it is on the pedal. Well, that's cool. I've never something else to add to the complete lube. Okay. I somehow in 50 years I missed that. So Judd Chapin, any adverse input about tubeless wire wheels? No.
Sam, but answered anyway.
Except when they do start to leak, then what do you do? But there are a lot of them out there. A lot of them out there. You look at the inside of the wheel rim and it's all smeared with like clear silicone, and they seem to work. So
Yeah. I've had the same tube on the same wheel burst twice now, and I'm getting tired of it.
That's where it starts to leak, you mean?
No, the tubes have. What happened to the first one is it just split, and I thought it was going to be split from the inside, where there's more friction with the wheel and the wires and all that. But it was on the outside.
Oh,
split about 5 inches long, and the same thing happened just the day before yesterday, 100 miles later, with a brand new inner tube. So I was looking into it, but I like the way old things are done. And
so
I get suspicious about new ideas on.
Well, yeah, go to I don't know where you're having the tube installed, or if you're installing it yourself. You can try
Schwab.
Motorcycle shops. Boy, they're putting tubes and tires all the time.
Yeah, well,
and you used to shake it full of talcum powder, but of course can't buy that anymore. So now you get these cornstarch. But the old fashioned way was to get it into place, sort of jiggle it around, and everything's all loose and everything. Inflate it, deflate it, inflate it, deflate it, and inflate it, deflate it, so that it moved around inside.
Right.
So. But
okay. Yeah, I thought about the talcum powder thing, and I'll get some cornstarch over there to Les Schwab tomorrow and
Yeah.
see if they laugh at me. Well, they probably will. That's okay.
Okay. What's that behind? It almost looks like horns. What's that behind you? It looks like,
Oh,
yep,
it's a
got it. After a while I thought, oh, well, that's in a lake or, well,
yeah. No, I thought I had little wings. Oh, it's orcas.
yep. Cool. All right.
Thanks.
Years ago, I put tubes in my new bias ply tires, and I was told later that the reason I had 3 blowouts was that you have to use radial tubes in radial tires and bias ply tires. Do you know if there's any truth to that, or was I just young and stupid?
My understanding, and I mean, this is tube type tires. I mean, we're dealing in some pretty old stuff here. Was that tubeless tires had ridges on the inside of them left over from the casting. They were not smooth on the inside. Therefore, the tubes had to be thicker to account for these ridges and casting flashes, if you want to call them that. And so that you had a much thicker inner tube. And that was the only difference I understood. And we always used the thicker inner tube because there's no such thing as tubeless tires. They're always
Right.
rough on the inside. I suppose if you got new tires and you wanted to take a Dremel tool and you got nothing else to do
Ain't
and
happening.
mask up God knows what's in the air when you're grinding away and make it all smooth on the inside, maybe your tubes would last longer. But I don't know anyone who's ever suggested that. I only offered as a possibility, so yeah. Okay, next one up, Gary, is there an easy way to remove the speedometer on a 1974 MGB? Well, of course, the short answer is no. Sorry, but to get it out of there, you've got to get the heater control out first. So that the knob comes off, the knob's got a hole in it. Turn the knob and find the hole and push an awl or a Allen wrench or something in there to depress the plunger. Take that off. Then you use your deep 9 or your deep 5/8 wrench. Spin the nut off. Get the nut, the lock washer, the flat washer, and then reach up behind the dash and struggle with that heater control and drop that out of the way. Now it's dangling. Now it's still difficult, but not impossible. So
I use Gloria to do it. His hands are small.
yeah.
Yeah, this is Gary. They said that some guys they claimed that you could go in through the tachometer hole, but I don't know if that was easier. But
no, because you've got the steering column in the middle, and that's a great huge triangular flange.
Yeah.
No way.
Okay.
So I'd go up. So when you're doing stuff like this, where you can't lie in your back. You go, oh my God, I don't fit. So I guess I'll take the seat out. All of a sudden, we're on our destination to a complete restoration. As long as one seat's out, might as well take the other seat out. They both need work anyway, right? You don't want to go there. So get that heater control out, and then look in a mirror. Shine your flashlight in the mirror and show it all around so you see what's going on back there. Then radio's off, eyes are closed. Reach up in there and you feel one or two of those grub screws, which are located on a they're not top and bottom or side to side. They're on a bias, but which way they are, I can't remember. And you got to get the cable off. So, and then underneath one of those on the legs that are up underneath there, underneath one of those legs is the grounding wire also. So when you go to put it back on, you got to put the grounding wire back on. And both of the thumb screws underneath there use like a number 10 internal star washer. When you go to put those back on, and how do you get that up in there? Red grease on the end of your finger, and a little bit of grease on the red grease on those studs, so those thumb nuts go back on. But why are you taking the Speedo out?
Well, I just picked this. Well, actually, I have two. I got a 74 MGB, and then I just picked up a 74 MGB GT. And the speedometer on the GT I just got is not cooperating properly.
Okay. And
Well, I
they're
thought I
both
realized that in the irony of these two cars, it's funny. I bought them like almost 3 years apart. They both are originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they're both white.
go
I said, I
figure.
don't know what the odds of that happening are, but I've got them. But that's what
Yeah.
that's why I'm trying to mess with the speedo. I'm gonna just I tried tightening it and it improved a little bit, and maybe I just need to lube it. I'm gonna have to still get in there and mess with it.
Are both the cars chrome bumper or both of them rubber bumper?
Both chrome.
Okay, all right. Because the
Hey,
speedo,
Gary, I was
speedo
gonna say,
change.
I put a link from the Zoom we did a year ago on instrument panels.
Oh, okay.
Check in the chat, because that was a really helpful Zoom, and we had a lot of resources in that one of people who do these kinds of the very intricate work.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, David Halliday's up next. David's usually in Australia. How do you check if the wheel bearings can be reused? And what's the best way to clean them? Well, the easiest way to clean them is compressed air. Just hold them out, hold the bearing out in front of you, and just take your blowgun and psst, and blow all the grease off it. After that, use some kerosene or something like that, carburetor cleaner, brake cleaner, something like that to get them nice. Don't make them spin too fast because they're not designed to spin at 2,000 RPM. So don't make them really spin real fast, especially ball bearings. Oh my gosh, they're not designed. They're not designed to do a couple thousand RPM, and they can and have exploded. So don't do that, but just blow all the grease off it. And then you look at each individual roller and you turn it a couple of times and turn them around. And if you can see any spalling on the taper bearing there, then it's faulty. And again, if you can see severe discoloration or metal loss on the race, then yes. But that's hardly ever the case. So
what is spalling?
that is where the surface of the metal comes off. It's hardened. The metal, if the metal's that thick, only the top part of it is hardened, and when it's hard, it's brittle, and it breaks off in little tiny chunks. Okay, let's see. Freddie with TF9941. We're just about at the end of production there. My brother lives in Wrighton near Newcastle. Pizza Hut cost him $50. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. So anyway, that's what all right. So David Halliday, I just pulled a BJ8 Healy front suspension apart, and there were no shims on the front hubs. I don't know if Healy front suspension is the same or not. I'm not a Healy guy. I'm the MG guy. I don't know. Brad Schwartz, please explain how to rebuild front brake calipers. What methods can be used to remove the two pistons? Okay, so is this MGB?
No, it's an A. I'm sorry, I forgot to say that.
Oh, all right. Okay, same. So you put the caliper in the vise. Nice to have some protection on the grip, on your vise, so it doesn't put a marks on the mounting flange on the caliper. I use copper jaws on mine. You can use hardwood. You can use anything. And you got 3 bolts. You got to take the 3 bolts out that hold the caliper halves together, despite the fact that the workshop manual says, do not separate caliper halves. Great big bold. It's like, give me a break. How else are you going to do it? So once you do that, then you can use air pressure to pop them apart. On the outer one, you use air pressure into the hole through which the fluid runs, and I usually put them put the caliper half between the jaws in the vise, because if you're just hitting it with air and that puck takes off, it can go 30 feet. And behind it is a trail of brake fluid. And nothing takes paint off faster than brake fluid. So put it in the vise, psst, 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 and that thing will keep moving out. Some people have used grease zerks in there and used a grease zerk to use a pumper upper to get pressure. But I've always had luck with compressed air. So
you're advising taking the two halves apart?
you have to. You have to. Absolutely. You have to. And then you have to buy the new O-ring that goes between the caliper halves. It's not an O-ring, it's a square O-ring, 17H 7947.
Or something, I think it's called.
It looks like an O-ring, and sometimes they're sold as O-rings, but it goes between the caliper halves. You'll be all right.
There's just one path between the two halves?
Just one O-ring.
There's a single, okay.
Yep, and I'll bet in the Moss catalog, I bet you can get a listing for that. If you can't, you can get one from the MGB. It's the same part. It's the same pistons.
Okay.
An A and a B. And so when you're doing an MGA, they were over engineered in the beginning. They have springs in them so that when you press on the brake pedal, the caliper pistons push towards each other, and then the springs draw them back a little bit when you take your foot off the pedal. Well, as it turns out, you don't need that. The brake rotor knocks the pads back anyway. You don't have to. What that results in is a much longer pedal push, because you've got to overcome this artificial distance that they've been pulled back. So when you get the caliper halves apart, get a pair of vice grips, take the stud that's right in the middle, grab that stud with a hammer, tunk, 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 and pull that stud out. Keep it if you're creeped, but pull that stud out and just get stainless steel MGB pistons. In the Moss catalog, there's a kit, comes with seals and seals and everything. Probably not the O-ring for the caliper half. Probably not that. You probably have to order that. And then when you're taking the dust seal out, so there's a ring that goes in there, and there's a metal ring that goes around. There's the dust seal. It's a rubber on the outside. Well, it's the dust seal, and it's kept in place by a metal ring. And those, excuse me, those the new ones and the old ones aren't always the same size. And if putting them back in, if you bend them just a bit or twist them or something, they're just awful to try to get back into place. So take the old ones out very carefully by taking the dust seal out, first of all, with some kind of hook and just dragging it out, and then taking a screwdriver and going around the circumference and just tick, 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 all, round and round and round, and save the old shields, because those work, those fit, Then when you're putting it all back together, use Silglide, Silglyde, Silglide. It's like Vaseline, which you can buy at Napa.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's see. Marty's got a contact for the frame up. Gerald says compressed air. Be careful. When was the last time that we had a workshop safety? Marty and I are just going over topics for our next time. Where are the topics that we had? And nowhere in there.
Not too long ago.
What we did workshop safety?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Okay. Anyway,
we just did it in May.
Oh, all right. Okay. Compressed air. It's anything. A screwdriver can be dangerous. We had those technical seminars at the shop, and we had people. We'd run through over 100 people over the course of a couple of weekends, every January and February. They were great. We had workshop weekend seminars. We had workshops. I had a guy from Honolulu come with an MGA gearbox on a rope around his neck on an airplane. I said, "How'd you get on that on the airplane?" He goes, "I took it as carry-on." It's like, oh my gosh. Anyway, he came to our workshop and rebuilt his MGA gearbox. Anyway, on the weekend seminars, which we dealt with MGBs or T types or A's or whatever, we always right after introductions, I talked about workshop safety. And I'd say, "Oh, has anybody had a fire? Has anybody done this? Has anybody done that?" And one guy was talking about having a Phillips screwdriver. I don't have anything to approximate a Phillips screwdriver. And he's holding it up and he's poking it towards himself on a box of speakers, speaker box or something. This thing pops off the back of the speaker and goes between his orbital socket and his eye, a Phillips screwdriver. So anything can get you in trouble. It turned out he was fine. It was unbelievable. He did not suffer a major eye injury. He just suffered a whole lot of embarrassment. But compressed air, any tool in the shop can get you in trouble. The car itself can get you in trouble. So yeah, anyway. David Halliday.
John?
Yes.
Hey, John, it's Gerard D'Angelo from Yardley, PA.
Yeah.
I recently read a couple of articles online about compressor safety. Some compressors have, like, people have had older compressors in their sheds, in their shops, in the garage, and the tanks have just let loose and exploded.
Ooh.
And it's
Ooh.
nasty. It's real nasty.
Ooh.
So if anything, if you have a compressor, make sure it's, after you use it, you open the tap, you drain it, and be very careful. If you can put it somewhere where it could be away from you, that's highly recommended now. So just something I came across.
Wasn't that the Sultana, the boiler explosion on the Mississippi right at the end of the Civil War? A greater maritime disaster has never occurred in the United States. There's a boiler going up. Same idea. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I always put a compressor outside. Why would you put a compressor in your shop? Bang, 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 bang. What are you, nuts? Put it outside. Make the neighbor listen to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much. David Halliday. Are you on, David? Are you on yet? It's just morning there.
Yeah, hi John. Yeah, I am on. I started listening to you on the train, so I've just got home after working this morning.
All right. Do MGB Kingpins need shimming under the top trunnion as sprites and midgets do? Yes. No shims were present on disassembly. Well, you don't think they were there, but they had to have been there. There's a great big thick. This is an MGB
The thrust washer.
Great big thrust washer, and then there are two more shims that are around 50 thousandths thick, and when you buy a kit,
like big washers, because I'm used to the small little shims you get on a Sprite and midget, but these ones they were like big, thick, big wide washers.
And those are incrementally sized, 56 thousandths, 57 thousandths, 58 thousandths, 59 thousandths, and you mix and match them until you get an up and down free play of a nominal free play of 3-4 thousandths of an inch.
Right. Yes. No, I'm rebuilding the front suspension on my factory BGT V8, which I bought the parts to do. I've got the Moss bags, and they were tagged in 2009. So it's been 15 years. I've had all the parts to do it, and I thought it's probably about time I did it.
Yeah.
So it's the first time I've done MGB Kingpins.
So take that when you remove the trunnion from the top. I think that's a 5/8. You get a 5/8 drill and drill through that, because you're going to be if you bought a kit, it comes with all those extra washers, and you can either size them first and write the size on them, or just go random. Probably be easier to get the size, and just you got to tighten up the top nut And so you don't use the new top nut, use the old top nut, which is the castle nut, because the new nut that comes with it is a nylock usually.
Yes.
So I'd use that old castle nut just so it's original. But anyway, you got to run that thing on and off half a dozen times as you fiddle with getting the end float right. So
Right.
if you can measure the end float, which has all been impossible, because you've got nothing to put a magnetic dial indicator on, so all you can do is sort of guess, and say, well, I guess it bangs up and down too much. I got to get some thicker shims. So you put some thicker shims in, and as long as it spins freely, and you don't necessarily have to hear it, but as long as it spins freely, you'll be all right.
Okay, yeah, no, that's good. Thank you. And I'm rebuilding, some BJ8 Kingpins at the same time as well. They're interesting actually. Kingpins are a smaller diameter than the MGB ones. I was quite because obviously the BJ8's a bigger, heavier car. I was quite surprised at that.
And it's always that bottom bushing that, or the kingpin, the bottom of the kingpin that fails. MGCs are very much larger on the bottom than they are on the top.
Yes. Yeah, which makes sense. Yeah. No, thank you.
Thank you. What's your temperature there today? 30? 28?
20s today, actually. It's quite a pleasant day. It's 19 degrees right at the moment, but we're due to have 30 degrees, 33 on Saturday, 32 on Friday. So it's up and down quite a bit at the moment, which Melbourne tends to be.
It was 45 here, but on the other scale.
Yeah, I'm not very good at the other scale. But
yeah. Okay. So we're down to, let's see, Motul makes break-in oil. So, see, George, what are you using for break-in oil? There's lots of break-in oils. Pat Garrity, he follows the advice of his engine rebuilders, and he uses a 30-weight non-detergent with a break-in additive. General Motors sells that break-in additive. We used to do that. Steve, my 1980 MGB doesn't have spacers or shims. I guess from what I've heard here, I should install them. What happens if I don't? Pat Garrity and I both say, we both got 50 years in the trade. We both say that it'll be okay. One of them's the right way to do it, but it isn't going to fall apart.
Okay.
We've never seen it fall apart in our.
I had taken it apart and cleaned and repacked the bearings and all that good kind of stuff, and I didn't know there was supposed to be them in, that spacer and all that.
Sure.
I just put it in like you would an American car, tighten them up and then back it off. And I've never had any issue in the 6 years that I own it now, so I didn't know.
You won't.
Okay, cool. Then I'm not going to look for more work to do.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jeff Nordlander, what's the consensus on tubeless tires on MG rims? But we already talked about that when Judd made some comments about or no, it wasn't Judd, it was Sam Chapin about the tubeless tires. We already mentioned that. So let's see. I have Carlisle FR15 tubes for use in radial and bias $36 for 2 tubes from tiregeek.com. So that's Carlisle FR15 tubes. Funny that's got a Carlisle name on it. Say Leyland drum. Here we go. I replaced
The ones I have are made in Vietnam. Here's a package.
Okay. All right. All right. Maybe that's a step up from what we're used to in the Chinese stuff. But my computer that I'm using tonight was probably made in China. So they can make good stuff. So, but I just hope that the Chinese military is being supplied by the same people that supply moss. So, all right. I replaced a choke cable on my 76 MGB and afterwards found I had an instrument light dangling loose. It appears all the instruments have lights on them. Does the heater control below the choke cable have a light in it? 76B, absolutely. Where does the bulb go? It goes into the housing there. If you feel around behind, you'll find a hole as big around your little finger, and that's where that light goes. Yes, it does.
Does it go into the actual metal body of it?
Yes.
Okay.
Look,
that's where it belongs. I just can't figure out where to put it.
look at the other one with a mirror, and just you get it goes in on a bias, doesn't go in straight, and it doesn't come in horizontal. It doesn't come in vertical. It comes in on an angle towards the top someplace. 2 o'clock, 10 o'clock, something like that. I think, as I remember. Look at the other one, the other heater control.
Okay, so it doesn't come in directly from behind.
No.
Straight in.
No.
Okay. All right, and then also quick thanks for your video on how to do that. I actually made the little wrench tool that you described somebody giving you to be able to go up there and take off that nut. And without it, I would have been lost. So thank you very much for that video.
Did you go to the hardware store first and buy a new nut to go on the cable?
No,
Okay.
the choke cable I got was an aftermarket one that had a bigger nut on it.
Okay, all right.
And so I was able to use that, but I ended up cutting one of my tools in half so that I could have a stubby short enough to get up there to do it. And I don't know what I would have done without that idea. So thank you so much.
Hey, you're very welcome. Yeah, it used to be you go to the hardware store and there was a bucket, right? There's a bucket that said mechanics quality tools, your choice, 79 cents. It's like, I think I'll take the 3/4 box end wrench, and then you cut that thing off, but now tools are a lot more expensive. But it can be a real cheese ass, excuse me, tool, because it's not suffering any torque, up underneath there. Well, I'm glad that helped out. So still looking here. 3 project MGAs and a TD for sale in San Diego. The A's are rough. The TD is fair. So Pat Garrity 52 at Gmail. Pat Garrity 52 at Gmail. So yep. Tony W thinks just finished greasing my front bearings on my 78B since it's unseasonably warm outside of Philadelphia. Okay, well, great. Wonderful. We're getting down to it here. Here we go, 1980 MGB. Fuel and temp gauge red line, meaning that they're reading full all the time. Meisel, are you still on? We're right at 9 o'clock here. We're down to just under 100 people. Tested the IB thing under the dash, and it shows the correct resistance. We're not after a resistance there. It's either the original one on the 1980 MGB is like a turn flasher. That's the voltage stabilizer. Clean the paint from the mounting area. The body, the thing has to ground. There was a round cylinder higher up connected to the battery side. Yep, that's the capacitor, so that the tick tick doesn't bother your AM radio. And the side with the wire going to the gauges, I disconnected that cylindrical thing from it, but maybe that's supposed to be connected. So that would only ground it and either blow a fuse or burn it out. It wouldn't cause it to read high. So the reason that the gauges are maxing is because you're getting full battery voltage through the voltage stabilizer. So the stabilizer is bad. That's a possibility. So are you still on?
Meisel is on, but they don't have a camera.
Okay, all right. So the original voltage stabilizer is like a turn signal. It uses a bimetal strip, and it's on, off, on, off. So if you put your test light between ground and light green and green, which is the supply side to the gauges, and turn on the key, after 20 seconds or so, your test light will begin to wink like a real crummy turn signal. Sort of on, off, off, on, off, just like that. It seems erratic.
You doing more over here?
But it's stabilizing the voltage over a period of time. The new voltage stabilizers use a Zener diode and put out a constant 10 volts. But I would say that the voltage stabilizer has failed. You need a new one. And the new one, yes, does have to be grounded. And that Phillips screw, which holds it in place, is just a bugger to get out of the firewall. Usually, you usually have to take the tachometer out and then use a long screwdriver and go through. So hope that answers that one. So 62 MGA has been sitting for 44 years. Yes. Should I remove the spark plugs and put any lubricant into the cylinders before hand turning the motor? Yes, I would do that. And actually, once you hand turn the motor, then once it turns over and turns over a full turn or two, then I just put a battery in it and leave the spark plugs out and spin the engine until you get oil pressure on the gauge on the dash, which shouldn't take too long. I mean, within 20 seconds.
Thank you.
That sounds fun. That's 44 years. Is that a family car, or you buy it, or what?
I bought that. I bought it in '74, and I had it in college. And after organic chemistry, second semester organic chemistry, I was just so flustered that I just decided I wanted to rebuild the dang thing. And it was funny. I made a trip to the UK, and I told my wife I bought a cap, one of the herringbone cap. She said, "You better put it in mothballs." She doesn't believe I'm going to get this car running. But I bought all the stainless lines from Classic Tubing.
Okay.
That all worked out. I just pulled the hubs off the rear. I put the ready sleeves because there was some wear on that differential. So gonna get that back. I'm taking the water pump out, because when I drain the lubricant, when I drain the antifreeze, the antifreeze look good. The motor has been. I had the motor rebuilt. It's never been turned. It's never been run.
All right. Okay.
Standard bearings. Unfortunately, sometimes high. It's the flat top. It's high compression.
That's who knows if the rebuild was okay. But I turned it over a couple of times and spin the starter motor and get oil pressure. If you don't get oil pressure, then you can backfeed it by taking the line off the. You got an oil on the 62. You got an oil cooler on that or not?
No.
All right, so you take
strange.
that line.
It's supposed to have, but it was never on there, unless somebody took it off. But it doesn't look like they were here. Go ahead.
Well, you can take that great big bolt that holds that banjo, the banjo pipe that goes up to the oil filter. You take that out of the back of the block and take that pipe loose and just put oil down in there and then turn the engine backwards. Which the easiest way to do that is on the ground. When the wheels are on the ground, you just put it in fourth gear and you push it backwards. But anyway, you turn the engine backwards, and that'll screw some oil down through the oil pump, and that'll prime it if you can't get oil pressure. But normally you'd spin it for 20 seconds, and then you go, you really ought to have some oil by then. There's still oil between the crank and the bearings, but not much. You want to, but then there's not a lot of pressure on anything either. So some people pressurize the oil system first, and the only way, the easiest way you can do that with yours in place is to fill up the oil filter with oil and in the tube, and then try to pressurize that tube. Or if you had a long tube that went to an oil cooler, if you had one of those, you could put it on the oil filter, fill the whole thing with oil, put air pressure on the end, and that'll blow oil through the filter and up into the engine and oil, through the crankshaft and everything. But
Okay.
or you can just spin it for.
Gotcha.
Do not start it without oil pressure. No.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Very cool. Yeah. Keep us up to date on how that's going on. So great.
Will do. All right.
Well, here we are. We're at the end of the chat section. It's 9:15. I'm happy to entertain any sort of last questions if anybody just wants to shout them out. Otherwise, Doug, are you online tonight?
Yes, John, I am. Yes.
All right. And did you bring a hat?
I brought, let's just say, variations on a theme.
Oh.
So I'll let you. You have your hat on. You have a hat to display.
So this campaign hat, was my father's Boy Scout hat. He bought it in 1934. Okay, so I win on age. Well, I don't know. I don't know what you got. My guess is that I win on age. So
Yeah, you do. Well, you might recall last session I proudly displayed my English-made bowler
yes,
derby that I bought at Dunn and Company.
Yes.
Well, to complete that outfit, years ago I still have this. It's my Van Heusen semi-stiff collar. It's patented and made in England by the British Van Heusen Company Limited, London, and it's one of the removable collars that you can wear on. I actually had a shirt at one time with a button, so I would put that on, and I figured if they ever going to make a remake of Downton Abbey, perhaps it might come in handy. I also picked up in England. It's in a little box with a little gold band around it, made in England. You can see the armbands. So,
very cool.
I need an eye shade, so if I want to audition for Bob Cratchit in the clerk in A Christmas Story, that would come in handy. And also, I have a very useful pair of spats. Now, I suppose if I want to wear these, if I want to buy a trombone, I could maybe wear them while I'm in the marching band. So, so anyway, John, it's not a hat, but like I say, it's a kind of variation, a theme of Old English headwear accessories, so to speak.
All right. Okay.
All right, John, I have to join you with another
look at
Scout
this.
hat.
Oh, yeah, yours is newer.
Well, maybe slightly. It's pretty old.
Okay. All right. I've got my late sons in the other room too, but it was stored badly, and it's all, it's like, the felt hat. It's all crunched up on the side. So yeah, I'll have to bring that out and go up against. Yeah. Anyway, from one scout to another. So my daughter lives in Crystal Lake, Illinois, and the whole family's in scouting now. She's the chairman of the Cub Scout pack, and her older boys transferred over into well, I don't know what the new words are anymore. This is like we had to go through this whole thing when that crazy identification, he, him, she, her stuff. Now it's scouting, and it's no longer, of course, Boy Scouts. It's Scouting USA. So I don't know what the Cub Scouts is still Cub Scouts, but Boy Scouts can't be Boy Scouts anymore because there's girls there too. So anyway. anyway, yep, good program. Only program of its kind. I'm glad that they suffered. I'm glad that they were able to survive all that, the bankruptcies and the lawsuits, and it's a good program. Anyway, I'm here to talk about MGs, not so much scouting. That's why I was in England in 1962. I started off the whole thing with that gentleman from Newcastle. I was in Newcastle in August of 1962 because I was in a scouting program in which 100 boys from the United States went to England. I was one of them, and 100 English scouts came to the United States and lived with different families. And it was underwritten by the Gillette Razor Blade Company. I think the whole month cost my parents $235, which is a whole lot more than it is today, but it still was a whole lot less than the whole program cost. And I felt guilty for years because I didn't shave. It's only the past 5 years or 8 years that I haven't had a beard. My late wife never saw me without a beard. Anyway, I was in scouting for the whole shot. So as were both of my boys. Okay. Anyway, back to MG.
Will we see you in 2 weeks again?
Yes. Yes. Marty, what was that date? Was it the second? Did we decide on the second?
I think so.
Yes. I think it was the 2nd and 16th. Yes. And so I'll send that out. And we talked, I unfolded that piece of paper, just a minute. And we talked about fuel systems, not carburetors, but next time will be like gas tanks and fuel pumps and some of the emission stuff that goes with fuel systems. And then other subjects that we have lined up for the next couple of times are battery. I don't remember talking a whole lot about battery. Emissions, just emissions, not all the charcoal canisters and even a TC's got emissions. And then banjo rear axles. So anyway, and if you want a subject, if you want me to focus on something, send me an email, send Marty an email, send us an email and let us know what you'd like to hear about something you haven't, it's still a mystery, and we'll try to demystify it for you. So any last minute comments or anything, anybody, before we say our goodbyes? We're down.
Yes, John, I got a question.
Okay.
Which one of us?
Well, George is on my screen, but yeah, George, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to wish you a happy birthday. It's coming.
Well, that's very kind. It's very kind.
Me to it. I was going to say that too.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to.
You know why I know that?
Yeah,
my birthday's coming too. The 25th.
Hey, well, I'm the 22nd. So yep, I'm gonna have to pull out the soundtrack from '76 Trombones and the Big Parade and listen to that until it shouldn't take too long before I don't want to listen to it too much more. So yeah, my birthday is on the 22nd of November, which is the day Kennedy was shot. And so that makes, one day out of 365. I mean, we're dealing with about 1/4 of 1% of the population has a birthday on that day. But then several years later, in 1968, on June 5th, my father's birthday, Robert Kennedy was shot. So that's kind of weird to have two birthdays, for two assassinations in the same family.
Yes, but I can beat you on that because I was born on April 4th, 1968, the actual day and not just the date for Martin Luther King's assassination.
Okay, that's cool. I mean, in a macabre way.
I mean, yeah.
And then but I'm not done. In 1980, on March 30th, when Reagan was shot, that's my little sister's birthday. So anyway, that's pretty intense. And my mother was born the day that Nixon resigned, but that was just a resignation. not an assassination. So
So
anyway,
you guys have a cloud hanging over
yeah,
you.
hey, I don't, pretty bizarre. But anyway, George, thank you. Now, somebody was behind you, and I shut them down to receive my birthday celebratory greetings. So thank you. But who was trying to talk at the same time George was?
John, that was me. I got a quick question.
Yeah.
I was just doing a full lube on my TD XPGA engine and XPHE engine, and I went to load grease up into the water pump, and it seemed to me it took a lot of grease. Is that normal?
Yes, there's a cavity in there that's just huge, and so you could probably put 30 pumps in there. Probably. I don't know how the grease was ever originally supposed to migrate. I mean, it's like these two bearings, they're roller bearings in there, but it's like putting grease in the middle of this and hoping that it's going to get both ways. But the downside is that you push the seal out of place. And then maybe it starts to weep some oil for a little bit until it settles back down. But I understand why that's going on. How old is that pump? Has that pump been on there for a long time?
I don't know. I bought it used.
Okay.
It appears that the engine was rebuilt. It's in great shape.
Okay. Because the modern pumps have still got that cavity and the grease fitting, so it's original, but the bearings are sealed, if that makes any sense.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're there. It's almost 9:30. So, I didn't ask Doug. I didn't ask Marty. What's our count for tonight?
I had 161 and Doug had 163.
Oh, well, hey, Doug wins tonight.
I know.
Okay, all right. Marty, you usually count unique individuals, so.
Oh, I didn't. I've been very busy back here, so I haven't done that one yet.
All right, okay. All right. All right, well, thanks to our participants, if you're still on, from Australia, New Zealand, and England. So thanks very much. We'll be
Thanks,
back down.
John.
Yes.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Hey, thank you. Shall I make a comment about Thanksgiving? I had two ancestors at the original Thanksgiving. So I got a handshake. I shook the hand that shook the hand that shook the hand, whatever, of Squanto. So, yep, long time ago. Thank you very much. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. It is the family. It is the family time. I just heard today that, phenomenally more people are going to be in motion on Thanksgiving this year than any year in the past. All the flights are full, and the buses and the trains, and it's a time for family to gather. So happy Thanksgiving to all.
Take care, John. Good night.
All right. Good night. Good night, all. Thank you.
Good night, John.
Safe
Thank
chat.
Thanks, John.
Thank you a lot, John.
Good night. Thank you.
And
Good night,
thank everyone
John.
else.